Hey guys, I know some of you are really nervous about this test tomorrow. I know you've got a lot of tests coming up in the next couple days. Uh, Honestly, this test isn't all that bad. You do have to prepare for it. If you didn't take good notes already, what I'm about to do now is only going to help you so much. I'll be honest, I watched a lot of kids work on math homework and history homework while these lectures were being given. So, I can't save the day for everybody by showing you a 15-minute video here or a 20-minute video. But I'll lead you through the presentation guidelines for government and church. The test is only on the presentation guidelines for government and church, and hopefully this will help you. But the test is really doable. Usually your tests have covered 2 presentations. This test only covers 1 presentation. So I'll go through everything. There are 2 church documents that these groups reported on. They reported on Pacem in Terris, and they reported on Caritas in Veritate. Some background information on Pacem in Terris. It's written in the 60s by Pope John Paul the 23rd. So it's written at a time when there's a lot of social upheaval, questioning of authority, trying to understand in a new way how authority works. And how government should relate to its people and how nations should relate to each other. You're in the era of things like the Vietnam War, the Korean War is coming. You have a lot of unrest. You have the Cold War with Russia approaching. You've got the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there's a real challenge in the world to find peace and to understand how authority should work and how it should relate to other authorities. And the church is trying to be an instrument of peace in the midst of that. And then you've got Caritas in Veritate, which is written by Pope Benedict XVI in 2009. And what he's trying to speak to is called Caritas in Veritate means love in truth. And I think Benedict's main thrust is that we've become very relativistic, where everything's the same, your way is the same as my way, it doesn't really matter if it's different. And we're not recognizing the differences between other religions and other worldviews, and being critical of things that deserve criticism. And he's also saying, I think, he's also finding that many Catholics are looking at the world without love, that we say we're Catholic, but that's not creating a more loving worldview. So the Catholic worldview is not focused on love, and the secular worldview has become relativistic, and he's critical of both of those things. Okay, so that's the basic premise for each of these documents. You had to know a number of terms for Pacem in Terris, which is the first one we're going to talk about, from Pope John Paul the 23rd. It's an encyclical from him in the 60s. There's this term, universal common good. The common good for a community is what's good for everybody in the community. Like there's the common good for Americans. So what would be the common good for all Americans and protect all Americans? And then there's this idea of the universal common good, and that usually applies to the common good among all nations. So basically the universal common good applies to everybody on earth, where the common good usually refers to one specific community. It could be America, could be Bucks County, it could be your local parish. But the universal common good is everybody on earth. Pacem means peace, terris means earth. Endowed, if something's endowed, it's been given to you. If we say that it's endowed by the Creator, if you have a right, rights really can only be endowed by a Creator. At least that's the Catholic perspective. So endowed means given. Natural law is the sense of right and wrong that every person has naturally without explicit faith in God or without explicit faith in a particular religion. It's the opposite of revealed law. Revealed law is the laws of a particular religion or scripture. Moral force is synonymous with natural law, and so is conscience. So natural law, moral force, and conscience are all synonymous. Now again, hopefully you have by now printed out the presentation guidelines. If you haven't done that, I would hit pause, print out the presentation guidelines, and then follow this lecture, or it's going to make no sense to you. And again, you really should be printing out the presentation guidelines for the lectures when they're given in class. Okay. Question number 1. For peace on earth, what's necessary? What order laid down must be recognized? What's necessary is that a country and that all countries follow natural law. It's not necessary for all countries to follow the Catholic religion specifically, but that every country refers to natural law and uses its conscience to the best of its ability to obey natural law. And that order that has been laid down by God. That's truth that's self-evident to all people, is natural law. Number 2, the Declaration of Independence and Pacem in Terris in paragraphs 9, 11, and 12. Pacem in Terris in paragraphs 9, 11, and 12, it is the Declaration of Independence. It uses the words endowed, right, natural law in the same exact way that the Declaration of Independence uses them, and obviously the Declaration of Independence came first. So it's an enormous compliment to American society. A lot of the Church's teachings on the proper role of government we take for granted because we say, well, that's what we have in America. But that's not the way it is around the world. So in some ways, America is truly a model for a healthy government according to the Catholic Church. And it's very much a compliment to the U.S. government. So the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all that is in Pacem in Terris, and it's in the Declaration of Independence. Number 3, do people have a right to basic education? The Church says yes. To higher education, the Church says that's based on achievement and your giftedness. But all people deserve at least some basic education. That society needs that. For society to be unified and whole, you need to be at least somewhat educated, or you won't have civility. Does God appoint every ruler? No, God does not appoint rulers. God did not make Barack Obama the president. We voted for Barack Obama as president, and we may or may not have been faithful to God's vision for America in that process. Does God create authority in general? Yes. God created humanity, and human beings need culture, they need society, they need each other, and the only way to have a healthy society is to have some form of organization, some form of government, some unifying force. So the idea of government in general is created by God, because our human nature is created by God. But God does not appoint specific rulers. So you need to be very careful if you're saying, well, it's God's will for this person to be president or that person to be president. That's a mistake. The Church will never make that type of a statement. Because no ruler is sinless or perfect unless it's Jesus Christ. Or I guess you could say Mary, too. Okay, number 5. Can the common good be created through fear and threats? No, you can't. That will never create the common good. It has to be created with a moral force or an appeal to the conscience, which therefore it has to be rooted in natural law or it has to be rooted in God, either explicitly or implicitly. If you are ruling by force, you may have something that looks like peace, but you really don't. You don't have peace because eventually people will rise up against that. Peace is based on justice. When you have a just and fair society where people have rights and equal rights, then you are on the path to peace. Oppression will not end in peace. That will always end in death and war and strife, and that's not an authentic peace. That peace is a lie. And that's true for our families, it's true for our schools, it's true for local governments, it's true in international politics. Must be based on justice. Number 6, if men are going to be obliged in conscience to follow the government, what must the government be intrinsically related to? To natural law, to God. And again, it doesn't have to be explicit, it can be implicit. You don't have to have God in the Constitution, but the natural law has to be obeyed by the Constitution. When people obey a good government, they are being obedient to God. If it's a good government based on natural law. Number 7, should government support some manner of insurance systems? This would mean like health insurance. I mean, that's the biggest thing right now. Should there be universal health care? Yes. The Church says that people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and health is a fundamental right, therefore. And the government has a role to play in that. Now, how the government plays that role, the Church doesn't outline that. Does it need private insurers, a state-run insurance program? The Church is not making a statement on that. but the church says that every good government is concerned about the health of its people and is proactive in response to the health needs of the people. How that's done privately, publicly, is not relevant. It just has to be done well, and it could be done differently for every government. And you're going to find the church, what it does is it lays out these broad strokes, puts out these outlines. It will not direct a specific government to have universal health care or not have universal health care. The church isn't going to do that. But it's going to tell every government the health of your people needs to be a priority, or else you are a corrupt government. And then each government figures out how it's appropriate. What are the intermediate groups the government should allow to act between workers and industrial organizations? Those are typically in America called unions. The Catholic Church is actually very pro-union if you read the documents. It's not pro-union to the point where unions can the church would not support the union strong-arming society or something silly like that. But the church would not be for the dissolution or the destruction of unions either. It's funny, this always comes up in contract negotiations with the diocese. And the diocese has been very faithful for teachers because the diocese has allowed the union to exist and has not tried to break the union. That's Catholic theology. Yes, the church is pro-union, but again, there shouldn't be an abuse of power either by unions. And the church doesn't say where the line should be drawn. It's just you can't have an abuse of power. Number 8, what must an established order among nations be built upon? It must be based upon natural law or the moral force. That's the only way you'll have peace. The United States and North Korea will only have peace, genuine, authentic peace, if North Korea and the United States agree to following natural law. That will be the only authentic peace. There may be a time for war, but there will only be authentic peace when both governments recognize natural law as the guiding principle for their relationship to each other. If one government doesn't, you will not have authentic peace. And if both governments don't, you won't have authentic peace. Are all governments equal in dignity? Yes, equal in dignity. Not always equal in impact on the world, but equal in dignity. Just like every human being has equal dignity, so does every government. It has an equal dignity. So North Korea has an equal dignity. They might not be faithful to natural law in many aspects, but they have the right to exist as a country, and the United States needs to recognize that. Okay, number 9. Who said, "What are kingdoms without justice but large bands of robbers"? Augustine said that, and it means that if you have a country but you don't follow natural law, you're just a band of robbers. You're just a gang, a mob. With natural law, you're a kingdom that models itself after the kingdom of heaven. Number 10. How should ethnic minorities be treated by those in the majority? They should be treated with equal dignity. They should also be quick to share their own culture with the larger culture. They should not look down upon the larger culture. So you have to be careful here. But sometimes within certain cultures, like within America, a minority culture will look down on the majority culture. And that's always a mistake. And the majority culture will look down on the minority culture. Also a mistake. They have to be equally valued in dignity by both sides. What is the universal common good? It's what's good for all nations. Okay. Next, Caritas in Veritate. Remember that's Pope Benedict XVI writing in 2009. Caritas means love. Veritate means truth. Charity is the theological word for love. Micro-relationships are relationships on a local level between individuals. Macro relationships are the relationships between societies. Degenerate sentimentality is an empty love. It's love without truth. It's just like, hey, I love you, I accept you, but there's no truth being told. Praxis just means practice or a way of doing something, a method. Sterilization is making someone barren reproductively. There are 3 forms of justice mentioned here: commutative justice, distributive justice, and social justice. Distributive justice and social justice are the same thing. Distributive justice is more of a secular term. Social justice is more of a religious term, a Catholic term. Those are the opposite of commutative justice. Commutative justice is a contract. If you do this, then that happens. If you don't do this, then this happens. You wouldn't feed the poor according to commutative justice, because unless you entered into a contract with them and they had to pay you back at some point for the sandwich that you gave them, that would be commutative justice. Social justice is just feeding the poor because you love the poor and you want to help them with unconditional love. So commutative justice is a contract, social justice and distributive justice is unconditional love. It's a covenant is what it is. Like marriage is a covenant and not a contract. Inviolability means it can't be violated, can't be removed. Inviolable rights, like are your right to life, for example. That's an inviolable right, according to the Catholic Church, that no one should take away. Do all people have the impulse to love? Yes. Can it be completely lost? No. It might be ignored, and almost completely ignored, but deep down people crave love. Even Adolf Hitler craved love. He had a twisted sense of how he was supposed to receive love and give it, but deep down he was a broken man who needed to be loved and healed, and he may have rejected that his entire life. Number 2, what is the heart of Church's social doctrine? Love. Love is the centerpiece of all Catholic thought, and it's easy to lose sight of that in social, juridical, political, and economic situations. It's easy to lose sight of that, but really all of our economic, political, juridical, and social decisions must be based on love, or else they're not Catholic. Just like anything else we do, if it's not based on love, it's not authentically Catholic. Even if you preach the gospel, but you do it without love, it's not authentically Catholic. So love is the centerpiece of all of our thought, even in the court system, and even in politics, and even in economics, even in a banking situation. Love must rule the day. It doesn't mean you just give everything away. It doesn't mean you don't act. You can't have a successful business, but what it means is that you respect love in the end, and you're faithful to God in the way you conduct your business. What does charity? Charity becomes degenerate sentimentality. Love becomes degenerate sentimentality when you don't tell the truth. If you just keep telling somebody who's doing a bad job that they're doing a good job, you might feel like you're loving them, but you're not loving them because you're not helping them become a better person by telling them the truth, that they need to improve in a certain area of their lives. Like a good coach isn't loving his athletes if he's saying, oh, you're doing great, and they're not doing great. A loving coach says, hey, I love you, I accept you, I'll work with you, but you need to work on this to be a better soccer player or football player or athlete. That's genuine love. It's love and truth together is genuine love. And nations need to do that. Governments need to do that. Individuals need to do that. Demographic control is not accepted by the Catholic Church. That's controlling the population with forced abortions, forced sterilization. That is not acceptable. We talked about commutative justice and all that stuff. Does every economic decision have a moral consequence? Yes. Sometimes they're slight, but sometimes they're major. If you're buying from a company that uses sweatshops, yeah, that has a moral implication on the workers in that company. Can the free market create social justice? No. Now, you really have to understand what the church means by a free market. A genuine free market means there are zero laws. Like, if you can go rob that bank and you're successful, then you didn't break a law. There's no law. That's a complete free market. There are regulations, though. You can't rob banks. It's against the law. You go to jail if you rob a bank. And so the church says there can't be a complete free market. Now, when Republicans and Democrats talk about free markets, nobody's talking about a complete free market in the United States, because that's really a free market is a free-for-all. Both believe in regulation. People disagree on how much regulation. The church just says there needs to be some regulation. You can't be allowed to do immoral things or violate natural law. Natural law should rule the day in economics. Can you be successful as a company without being based on pure profit? Yes. Like I said before, Chick-fil-A is a great example of that. They're closed on Sundays, which you think would make them less profitable. And here they are, incredibly successful while being closed on Sundays and adhering to that Christian value that they believe in. Pretty impressive. And perhaps they make more money because they have those values, because some Christians, those values resonate with them, and they're more likely to buy Chick-fil-A than McDonald's because they like the Christian values. So there you have Chick-fil-A not being for pure profit. and they're making some decisions that are not pure profit-based decisions, and they might actually be more profitable in the end because of that. Number 8, human ecology versus environmental ecology. Human ecology is protecting human life. Environmental ecology is protecting nature. You can't have one without the other because human life is a part of nature. And if you protect life in the womb but you destroy the environment, then you're not really protecting life outside the womb. You're not really pro-life. And if you say you want to save the seals but you don't want to save unborn children, that doesn't make any sense either. You have environmental ecology but you have no human ecology. Either all life is valuable or it's not. It doesn't make any sense to divide it up. The other things in your notes, the other questions are answered. Sorry about that. The other questions are answered on Grade Connect. So just be sure you look through those notes there. You'll have heard explanations of those things in class as well. Be sure you understand the difference between secularism and fundamentalism. Both are unacceptable. Secularism is kicking God entirely out of government, even implicitly, that there is no mention of the word God allowed. Fundamentalism is accepting only one religious perspective. The Catholic Church rejects both. There should be a freedom of religion, and so you should be allowed to have religion. People should be allowed to make decisions based on their faith, but it shouldn't be forced. One faith should not be forced on them. So the Church would reject the secularistic culture of France. It would also reject a fundamentalist culture, say in a fundamentalist Muslim country where you could only be Muslim, or you could be executed. That would be a Taliban perspective. You should also know that humanism is the perspective where the worldview is centered on a human experience, and only what a human can experience can teach us something. Secular humanism is when you believe that you can't experience God in your human experience, and therefore you reject God. Theistic humanism is the belief that you can experience God in your human experience every day, and therefore you can believe in God based on humanism. Karl Rahner would be a theistic humanist. Most people, when they say they're humanist, are secular humanists, however, which is not the most logical thing, but there you have it. Anthropocentric theology starts with the experience of man, starts with theistic humanism, and then builds to the understanding of God and heaven and things like that. Theocentric theology starts with the idea of God and heaven, and then kind of filters that down to how it relates to man. Either theology is acceptable. Different theologians and saints have had different points of emphasis over the centuries. God bless you guys. This test is not easy, but it is not as hard as the other tests. If you understand everything I just told you, you will be on your way to a great grade. If you don't, you're in trouble. You need to really understand this stuff. If you took great notes and you watched this video, I think there are definitely kids who will get hundreds. All right? God bless you guys. Good luck tomorrow on the test.